Thanks so much for joining us for another edition of KFFB's Open Mic program. We do have Congressman French Hill with us right now. And Congressman, thanks so much for taking time and talking with us.
Bob, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Well, one thing we need to talk about, and I guess it's on a nation's concern, and that was the president coming down with COVID. That was kind of a shock to many, but, you know, he's been all over the country. He's the most protected man, but they had some good outcomes. He's out of the hospital now.
Well, I think it's a warning to everybody that he is one of the most protected people in the world. He lives in a bubble. Everyone who works around him is tested daily. No one gets within 10 feet of him. Even when he's out in public, he has a major perimeter around him, and yet he still was exposed to COVID-19, which just shows you how infectious the disease is. That's the bad news. The good news is, look at the treatment. I mean, President Trump is 74 years old. He got some oxygen. He got cocktail of antibodies. He got some of the most recent therapies, and that shows you that we can really treat this disease and cure people faster from it.
When you look at the cocktail and that of treatment, he was getting some treatments that it's almost experimental. Is that correct?
Right. I mean, it's one of the therapies that's in clinical trials right now, human clinical trials. Congress appropriated $10 billion back in March to set up Operation Warp Speed, to speed therapies to cure this disease faster and better, and also to find a vaccine. Both are working, and President Trump received one of those treatments that a lot of patients are now doing once they're hospitalized.
Another thing we got to talk about is holding China accountable. That's something you've talked about since you've been in office. Tell us what's the latest with China.
Well, this is so important. I think we now have a consensus in the Congress on a bipartisan basis. President Trump has been a great leader on resetting our relations with China, which were way overdue. Since 2013, China has changed their view of the world, and they now want to dominate the world. This was a strategic decision they took back in 2013. President Obama, in my view, actually encouraged it, and it's left us with this very challenging situation diplomatically, militarily, financially, economic policy. So President Trump has reset that dynamic in our country. We have consensus around it, and now, in my view, the G7 large countries, those that are democracies and open economies, agree with the U.S. So now what we have to do is just hold them accountable for their mistakes they've made in around the world, and try to get them to play by the rules instead of it just being the U.S. doing it. Now I think we're going to have allied support to push that change on China.
You know, when we look at about the tax returns, you know, there's so many Arkansans that are kind of held up because there was the stimulus package that came, the first stimulus. And to speak to that a little bit for those that are concerned about all the paperwork going on.
Well, we got two issues. Believe it or not, we have some Arkansans who didn't get their economic impact payment from back in May. We can help. Just email us at hill.house.gov. And secondly, people have been waiting for their refunds from their 2019 tax returns. We filed those late this year. As you recall, because of the pandemic, they were due July 15th instead of April 15th. And there's a 3 or 4 month, maybe as much as 5 month backlog due to getting these refunds taken care of. So again, if anyone is expecting a refund or is there confusion around their refund owed for 2019 taxes, I hope they'll reach out at hill.house.gov.
Now, we look at a lot of small businesses. You know, that's something that we've talked about during COVID, that some businesses were shut down in the district in all of Arkansas because of the COVID, and some are open and limited, and some are very nationally. We were seeing more as my wife and I were at the mall over the weekend. One of the businesses said actually the national change took a harder hit than some of the mom and pop stores. Tell us what's happening there and what we can see to help Arkansans during this COVID crisis.
Well, I'm frustrated that Congress has not extended the Paycheck Protection Program. This has been blocked since late July by Speaker Pelosi, who's asking for $2.5 trillion of spending that I don't believe that we need to keep fighting the virus and the pandemic. I think she's just overreaching. This has created a real logjam in Congress, unfortunately. And so what's exciting is the PPP program helped 43,000 small businesses across Arkansas and got $3.2 billion of aid into our state and saved tens of thousands of jobs. And there's some businesses this fall, Bob, that still need that help, and that's why I support continuing the Paycheck Protection Program with a proviso that if your business is down 25% or so in revenue from 2019, you're eligible. And that just really means that we're limiting that PPP money to those who really need it, who are still struggling to get their business open from the pandemic. But as I say, Nancy Pelosi has blocked that thus far, so we're still fighting for our small businesses in Congress.
When you look at this fighting, why is the Speaker of the House holding this up? Why can't we come to agreement? What is the big division between the two talks?
This has been going on since late July, early August. In fact, last week, 23 Democrats in her own party wrote her a letter saying she was being unreasonable and it was wrong to hold up small businesses while she tried to get major tax benefits for rich families in New York and California, or try to get $1 trillion of extra spending for these big states like California and New York. These things could be done later and be evaluated later. The people who need help now are those who are on unemployment and our small businesses. That's what we should be emphasizing, and she's been using those as bargaining chips to get these other big spending priorities, plus some things that don't even have to do with the pandemic. She's still trying to get same-day registration for 16-year-olds to vote across the country and mixing all these non-pandemic policy ideas in her bills. So we're all still trying to get relief for our small businesses and for our families who are still hurting. That's what President Trump's trying to do as well, and it's been just very frustrating to deal with the Speaker of the House. The over in the Senate, they did pass a bill. They passed about a $600 billion bill that contained PPP extension and support for families and schools and liability protection. So they were able to get a bill passed, and that's what frustrates all of us in the House.
You know, speaking of President Trump, his nomination of Judge Amy Coney Barrett really, I thought, was kind of a fast track because she was already approved earlier. But Speaker Pelosi and other Democrat members are trying to deflect the discussion onto the Senate on appointing new justice to the Supreme Court and even talking about impeachment. How, again, does impeachment, for those that has heard this term, how can impeachment have anything to do with appointment of a Supreme Court justice?
Well, this is just madness, is the short answer to your question. I mean, Speaker Pelosi would have to convene the House of Representatives, draw up articles of impeachment, pass articles of impeachment without a committee hearing, without any support in her own party, all because impeachment is takes precedent over any action in the Senate. It's just a wild, harebrained, left-wing idea from her that's going nowhere. Amy Bryant is a eminently qualified justice potential. She was nominated to the Court of Appeals back in 2017. She got the vote by a bipartisan group of senators that approved her nomination. She's a distinguished professor at Notre Dame at the law school, and she is a strict constructionist on the U.S. Constitution. She's an original textualist. She's a clerk for Judge Scalia. She will be an outstanding justice, loyal to the Constitution, not loyal to politics, not loyal to one religion or another, but loyal to the Constitution.
You know, a lot of folks have been talking about comparing it to 2016, about the national election. Speak to that for a moment. When the Senate held up and said, let's wait until the new election. And of course, that was an open election. That was not someone that was going into their second term or possible second term. I think that's a difference, too.
Yeah, I think that's important. You bring up a good point. It's important for listeners to understand the differences there. In the history of the United States, when a president and the Senate are of the same party, overwhelmingly, the nominee for the Supreme Court in an election year is approved. When the president and the Senate are of different parties, overwhelmingly, an open nomination to the Supreme Court is rejected. That's just the way it's gone over American history. And my Democratic friends just ought to understand that if this were President Obama and Chuck Schumer was the Senate leader, there's no question in my mind they would proceed to nominate a qualified justice to the Supreme Court. As President Trump said the other day, he gets elected for 4 years, not for 3 years. And so this is absolutely normal. No norm is being broken here. This is how the system has operated for 244 years. But this is a recent full advice and consent confirmation process in the Senate, just dating to 2017, of a woman who has an outstanding rating from the American Bar Association, who is an outstanding professor at Notre Dame Law School, who's been recommended for the court for literally years and years. her professors, when she was a student, said, this woman is destined to the federal court system. So I believe this is Amy's destiny, and I hope the Senate promptly confirms her nomination.
Well, we appreciate you taking time and talking with us and updating us what's
My
going
pleasure,
on in
Bob.
D.C. for sure.
Thanks for the invitation.
We've been talking with Congressman French Hill here on Timeless 106.1 KFFB's Open Mic.